Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights podcast episode recap from episodes 974 up through 1000. You'll notice this episode is titled 1101. The episodes in the thousands are intended to be YouTube videos that are heavy on the pictures from my card wall and things like that. So I'm behind on that, still waiting for my latest BGS reveal. Don't have enough. When I do, I will resume that, and that's where those numbers will be. This is episode 1101, and I'll keep going from there for a while. No promises, other than I'm still enjoying it and still appreciate you giving me feedback and submitting questions and comments. And when I see it shows, it's the greatest hobby in the world, as I said. Okay, episode 974, the Upper Deck Hockey Series 2. Not a box battle, it's just a box opening. You can check these out. I try to look at it in a different way. Many of these boxes have a long legacy, like Upper Deck Hockey is. It speaks for itself, but it's always nice to open a box and share insights and perspectives. So 975 was the recap. 976 was the first part of my discussion with Greg Morris of Greg Morris Cards. I think he's the largest at what he does, which is taking vintage cards and putting them on eBay as his own, as well as consignment. Pretty big business, lots of employees, and really treats it as a business and did a nice job for a friend of mine. It matters whether it's a VG or X-Mint or good condition card, and his eyeball and grading with his team is respected. And so we're able to move some of the vintage cards in the 50s and 60s that my friend had. So it was a good choice, good experience. Thanks, Greg. And he gave some insights about his business. Thought that was enjoyable. 977 was a tribute to my dad. He had just passed away a couple days before. And, I don't really want to go back through that other than really appreciate all the kind comments. I did speak at the funeral, and I just had a great dad and 97 and a half years of a good life. So he was a blessing to many people, not just his family. And I am part of his legacy. But thank you for your well wishes. My mom is doing pretty good, all things considered, but she's 97 and a half as well. 978, this was right before Father's Day. I did my annual Father's Day episodes with the father and son. Jimmy and Jimbo, I don't know, it's James and James Jr. and the third, just like my dad and myself, dispenses with JSA Authentications. I actually had dinner with them at the National a little while ago, and turns out I was sitting next to the third Spence, which is the brother Ryan, who's also a great representation of the Spence family. They have a great generational legacy going. 979 was Mike and Nick Jaspys. Go way back with Mike, including knowing his dad when his dad was around. They were one of the pioneers of the hobby. And I think a lot of these father-son episodes should be timeless. If you listen to it next month, you'll get a kick out of it if you know those guys. 980 was the grading conversation with Rick Probstein. I had contacted him. I actually initiated with him, and I had some business dealings with him, and I think he's solid. But I thought this is a really busy guy, but he just threw it out there that he had these two issues with the BGS, one being the 30 and turned out to be 31 Jordan rookies. Plus he had some comments about BVG. And I thought, I think I could respond to that. So I did. He recorded, we both recorded. He used, I think, the whole discussion without editing on his Instagram and put it up so people saw that. And I cut it up into different parts, trying to break it into segments to keep it under 15 minutes. But I really asked him for 10 minutes of time, and we wound up talking for an hour probably. He's a heavy hitter. He's doing a great job of what he does. He is who he is, and it's working for him, and it's working for a lot of the people that consign to him. He's doing something right if he's putting up 800,000 auctions a year. He's got a big business, and congratulations, Rick. 981 was the Mark Hoyle. I actually had a longer conversation with Mark along with Rich Klein, and we broke it up into two parts. One was about test issues, which was a good thing to tackle. You just can't collect test issues or inserts, which was 985. They just get too expensive. If you do it by team, even that's expensive, especially with Red Sox. It was great having those discussions with Mark along with Rich. Just an amazing situation to be. He got in and has been diligent and serious about collecting all the Red Sox cards. And it was just great to make a better friend and hear his story. 982 was the second part with Greg Morris. He's a busy guy. Thanks, Greg, for taking some time. 983 was another part of Rick Probstein. Talked about that. 984 was Torsten Bauer questions 5.0. That means Torsten has had 4 other episodes dedicated to him. He's a very sharp guy from Germany. I like hearing the Euro perspective as well as his educational background and just how he does the hobby. It's interesting. He comes at things a little different, and keep them coming, Torsten. Really have enjoyed making friends with you and getting to know how you do things. 985, again, inserts, Mark Hoyle, Red Sox. Talked about that. And then 986, Rick Probstein again, the final one. Although I may do Rick Probstein again. If you've got, I don't know, take requests, get me to ask Rick a question. But generally, I'm working off some of the things that he brings up. He tries to have some provocative daily Instagram short video. 987 was the sports autographs with Jimbo. Jimmy Spence's, I call him Jimmy, but maybe he's James. But Jimbo is definitely the son. And this was actually recorded before Jim, the dad, James, Jim Sr., he's actually the junior, before his dad came on. Jimbo and I talked about just the business of getting cards autographed. And like we're saying, the autographed rookie cards are definitely a thing now. 988, the father-son, second part with Nick and Mike Jasperson still. When I think about it, I can see how Mike has reinvented himself or moved into new areas. He's been ahead of the curve on some of these things of jumping in and moving into things and really making it happen, and has done an excellent job. 989, outtakes on podcasting from John Newman. I forget how this came up, but he said he wanted to do something. John Newman, he's got lots of irons in the fire, and I'm honored when he asked me to participate, but he wanted to talk about podcasting. And so these were his questions, but I pulled off enough to make an episode out of some of the questions that he asked that I answered in different ways. 990 was Brian Capel, the 48-49 Leaf Baseball. You might think we beat that to death, but it's a very intriguing set. I've already dealt with it several, but Brian contacted me and just said, hey, I think I have some new information or some better information to move the understanding of this complicated company and set. This predates Brian Gray's Leaf by a lot. Leaf was a combination of... Anyway, Brian explains it all. He's got a great graphic design background, of which I've dabbled. I'm not a designer. In doing a magazine, you find out about some of those things. And then the legal aspect of a couple lawsuits that were filed. So he did a lot of legwork, wanted to give him some airtime on that, and there's more to come on that. I don't know that we'll ever have the definitive word on 48-49 Leaf, but we've certainly pushed it out there. And for you veteran collectors that are curious about just a fabulous set with some iconic cards in there, it's probably the iconic Jackie Robinson and the iconic Hal Newhouser and the iconic Satchel Paige card, among others. 991, outtakes on the National. I don't think it's obsolete, but this was ahead of the National and just some talking about it. 992, outtakes on regulation from Hobby Hotline from the next week. Again, the whole point there is just self-regulation. I don't want people telling me what to do, but I want to tell other people what to do. I want to make suggestions of what people should do. But if there's bad actors, we need to do our own self-regulation of, again, if they're innocent until proven guilty, but once they're proven guilty, I don't want to do business with them, and I don't want my friends to do business with them either. 993, you might listen to this next year. It's the national final preparation for this year. It'll change a little bit when I'm going to Cleveland next year. I don't have my ticket yet, but I'm certainly planning on going. And that's a little bit different for Cleveland because the IX Center is not as convenient. So it'll affect the trade nights for sure, which doesn't impact me that much. 994, outtakes on the National from John Newman's Sports Card Nation. He does an annual, he tries to talk about that, and he just comes at it in a different way. And so if there's something fresh that I haven't talked about, I'm going to clip it out of there and post it to my channel. 995 was the 8 listener questions, 7.0. That's the 7th time I've had 8 listener questions that I grouped together. I've still got a backlog. I've got more questions. That doesn't mean don't send them. I keep sending them. I don't do every question, but when I get good questions or non-duplicative questions, I'll try to address them in a future episode. And if they're super timely, I'll do them sooner, but a lot of these things are just some really interesting questions that I can take some time to give a good answer. 996 was the tribute to Mark Jordan. Again, first person I thought of was Beth Grimsley. I knew she had worked for Mark a long time, so to get the perspective, she was so helpful to him, and he had a great run, but it didn't end that great. He passed away at 69, was not in good health, but he sure made an impact. One of the founding fathers at a very young age of our hobby. Mark is missed. And Beth, thank you so much for sharing your stories about Mark. And thank you, Heritage, for being a final place for Mark to use his skill set. $9.97, the outtakes on trimming from Hobby Hotline. Again, this was just a segment of the hour-long show. Evan Mathis put out a how-to video, how to trim cards. And why would he do that? It's hard to know other people's motives, but I'm hoping that the end result is that all the graders take note and the deceptive trimming will stop as soon as it's clear that every grader is catching that. And then it will not be worth it to do it. $9.98 and $9.98A, I kind of moved in. I wasn't planning on doing these, but it snuck up on me. Ray Fonio and Mike Steveline and Victor Roman have the Baseball Card Hall of Fame ballot. They do every year. The last few years I've come on and given my picks. And I'll tell you what, I am clearly not a typical hobbyist. I'm exceptional, but I'm apparently exceptional in a way that I do not vote the same way other people did. So I faithfully gave my picks, and I mentioned the others that I liked, but did not fit on my ballot. I did pretty well last year. If pretty well means that what I picked is what the other people picked, but I don't know. I like my ballot. I still like my ballot, but can you believe it? I only got 1 out of 10. The Eddie Plank card is the only card that I decided to vote for that came in. The other 9 are waiting till next year. Now, they gave a shout out to me that what came in first was a suggestion that I put in, but I didn't even vote for it. I was going to vote for it next year. And it was the Joe DiMaggio heads up version, the higher number with cartoons. They thought that was great. I'm embarrassed that I suggested it. It probably was number 11 for me, but you only get to vote for 10 and you only get to vote once. $9.99 was my 2023 Chicago National Aftermath. Just my thoughts. Again, I'm not typical because I've been to every national, and I plan to go to my 44th next year with Cleveland, and I'll probably refresh by listening to some of these. They're titled in a way that you can find them. And then finally, 1,000, the reflections. If you remember, my episodes frequently have been every 20th or 25th divisible by those numbers has suggested a recap episode. And 1,000, I just thought that's an iconic number. I wanted to share it with Rich. I wanted to do it with Rich. I wanted to make sure I thank my wife, my awesome wife, and Rich, and all the sponsors, all the listeners. Just, it's been a great ride, and the ride continues. So I will be around a little bit longer, taking it a day at a time or 3 days a week at a time for now. Appreciate all your kind words and thoughts, and I will be back every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the foreseeable future. So thanks, everybody, and